Hey listeners, I'm Karen Riley Jeffers, NCSM's Eastern 2 Director. Welcome to our series, Learning with Leaders, Everyone Belongs in Mathematics. Thank you for joining me and my co-host Abel Maestas, the host of Teaching That Counts, as we talk with both leaders and influencers about their math journeys and contributions. Today, we will hear from our special guests about their inspiration, perceptions, and insights regarding instructional decisions that make the mathematics space welcoming and engaging to all. Listen and learn about how beliefs, practices, and policies must continue to advance to ensure that each and every person feels a sense of belonging in mathematics.
Welcome, everybody, to the NCSM Learning with Leaders podcast. We're so excited for everyone joining us this evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you are, on your run, walking your dog, in your car, wherever you are listening to us. We are excited to have you here listening to this very special episode of the NCSM podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Abel Maestas, and joined with
Karen Riley Jeffers.
All right, and we are excited for this very special episode of Learning with Leaders podcast. This month, we continue our collaboration with the Journal of Mathematics Education Leadership. We welcome the authors of the journal entries for the most recent publication to share with us their work. So we have a great amount of speakers here. So we're going to have everyone introduce themselves to our audience and let them know a little bit about what you do and your role. We will start with Corey.
Hello, everyone. So happy to be here with you all. My name is Corey Bennett, and I'm professor of mathematics education. And I also get the opportunity from time to time to consult with schools globally, internationally, to help them where they're at and the things that they're working on as well, too.
All right. Thank you, Corey. And next we have Courtney.
Yeah, hi, Courtney Baker. I'm at George Mason University, an associate professor in math ed leadership. So I get the honor of working with in-service and pre-service teachers, specifically teachers who want to engage in leadership. Director of the Math Ed Center, and the work really helps keep me grounded in school-university partnerships.
Awesome. Thank you. How about Ryan?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm excited. This is a great group to talk about coaching with. So Ryan Gillespie, University of Idaho. I'm an assistant professor there. This is my fourth year. I'm relatively new to academia. Prior to this, I was a high school math teacher for 9 years and then a math coach for 11 years. So this is an exciting part of my career now, thinking about helping others learn about coaching and professional development and researching and studying. So a lot of new for me and carrying over a lot of practitioner experiences from first part of my career.
Excellent. Okay, how about Skip?
Hi there. I'm professor emeritus at McDaniel College in Westminster, Maryland, and among a bunch of experiences, I'm past president of the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics and Association of Mathematics Teacher Educators and Research Council for Mathematics Learning. So it's going to be an exciting 45 minutes.
Yeah, very exciting. I knew that same name sounded very familiar to me. Stephanie.
Hey guys, I'm Stephanie Saplarides. I'm an associate professor at University of Cincinnati. I'm a very proud former NCSM board member. And I'm so excited that this collaboration between JMEL and the podcast, I helped initiate it. And so now I get to be a participant, and which is it's really cool to have things come full circle. At UC, I stay busy directing our PhD program in the School of Ed. And again, I'm just excited to be here with this group of people. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, that's right. It's been at least 2 years since we spoke about bringing this together.
It's amazing that this has lived on. It makes me so happy. So thank you both.
Legacy, right? Legacy. How about Kenny?
Hi, my name is Kenneth Johnson. I am the curriculum specialist and instructional coach at Carroll Morgan School in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. My responsibilities now have given me a shot of rejuvenation in the arm because we're transitioning from Common Core to an IB hybrid type. So guiding teachers along through that process is going to be something I'm looking forward to this year, and live by the mantra that every learner deserves to be known before they're expected to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Love
I'm
that.
excited just to have all of you on because Kenny, I haven't interacted with you. Brian, we met previously on another one, but Skip, I've read some of your things. Stephanie from NCSM and Corey and Courtney, I've read some of your things as well. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation and everything that you all have to share. So even though Abel just introduced you, if you will share some of your journey in education that brought you together in your JMEL published work, and we'll start with Courtney.
Wow, here we go. Yeah, it was really, that's a really good question, because for me, that journey with Margaret and Skip really goes back to about as early as 2004. And the state of Virginia had just started some math specialist standards, and Margaret was director of the program at that point in time. Skip was doing all the amazing work nationally that he does. And I was a student in those programs, learning how to coach and how to lead and how to engage in that blend of content and pedagogy and leadership. And so that, I guess, it's turned into a multi-decade longitudinal kind of relationship, and I've had the honor of learning with and from them. The work for our publication centered on district leaders, and it was for each of us, I think. I'll let Skip speak to it too, but starting off with looking at math coaches, because that was a lot of the space in our state, in our area, and even nationally, what was happening is everyone was focused on school-based coach. And so our interest, and even my work with Stephanie here on the podcast and others, really also has expanded into a district space as we started realizing there's parallel, right, in leadership and what supports, for these individuals, district leaders who are tasked with building capacity and creating coherence for the systems at a level above the school, right, and even for collections of school. I don't know, Skip, does that capture some of it, or?
I think you're doing great.
Thanks.
Let me add on to that. Karen, you want me to add on to that in terms of my connection? Because my connection's a little bit longer. And it begins with this, the Principles and Standards for School Mathematics that NCTM published in 2000. I was one of the writers of that. And when we wrote the grade 3 through 5 section of that, one of the recommendations we made, and again, this was published in 2000, which means it was probably written in 1999, which means we're close to 30 years out here. And when we said the need to explore the development of programs for mathematics teacher leaders and mathematics specialists. So since then, my experience has included several grants and projects, including one I directed called the Elementary Math Specialists and Teacher Leaders Project, and the most recent edition of the AMTE Elementary Math Specialist Standards, which was released a couple of years ago, testifying before Congress about the need for math leaders, particularly at the elementary grades. But as Courtney just indicated, we're beyond that. I mean, we're talking about secondary specialists, and our work currently in this manuscript and continuing works is really about frankly the people above them, the district math specialist, the person who basically works with the coaches and specialists, which heretofore hasn't really been addressed. So that's enough for me.
Thank you. How about Kenny?
My approach, Corey and I, we met about 11, 12 years ago. I was a new teacher just starting abroad, working in the Middle East, and Corey was coming in as a consultant. Helping the school was fairly new, hadn't been open for more than 10 years. And I was the math teacher and the department head at the time. And when Corey came in, one of the things I noticed in my classroom was procedurally, my students can work from step A to step E. That wasn't a problem. And they could always come up with the correct answer for the most part. And we fairly had a lot of discourse in the classroom. So there was a lot of engagement from that standpoint. For example, I remember we had the tennis ball approach where I would toss the tennis ball to to start the discussion, and whoever had the tennis ball commanded the attention of the room. But when Corey came in, one of the things he noticed was there was a lot of procedural, there was a lot of discourse, but there wasn't a lot of writing. And this kind of led us to the problem task, where we kind of took the Marilyn Burns old additive approach, and we had this one problem, and we said, okay, for 6 weeks, my students were going to write for 15 minutes every day, uninterrupted. And there was never an answer. So we never analyzed an answer. We just analyzed their thinking. And it was amazing to see their conceptual understanding grow. The procedures showed me what they could do. The discourse told me how they communicated, but the writing helped show us how their thinking developed. And from there, we took the project and we presented it at NCTM, and then moved on to publishing it in the publication. Anything that I missed, Corey?
I mean, you summarized it quite well. I mean, one of the nuances here that I think stands out in a lot of ways is within the international school context, the idea of an instructional coach was almost unheard of. And a lot of people had no idea how to frame this work, or no idea how to even think about it and consider it. And given the fluidity of employment, people will work at a school for 2 to 4 years and move somewhere else. It really disrupted systems within where Kenny was at. And so thinking about, Skip, you talked about creating these systems and thinking about it like there's people above the coaches and the leaders there that needed tools to how to think about the work. That was very much the case here, that many didn't even know what a coach was. They thought he just dealt with athletics. And so really, when you're starting from ground zero of what is this person, what do they do, really creates some complexity to a system.
Thank you. Stephanie.
Yeah, thank you. I guess what I'll share, and Ryan, you feel free to chime in. So it's the question is, what brought us together in our JMEL published work? Well, Ryan, do you want to take the lead on talking about Project Calm?
Yeah, I said, sure. I suppose that is how it started. And I think I was in like my first 2 or 3 months of my new position as assistant professor, and I just happened to land a fairly sizable grant for a professional development project. So I made a very awkward and panicky phone call to Stephanie, who I didn't really know all that well, right? We had seen each other at conferences, and I felt comfortable leading the professional development side of it, but I saw that there was a lot of really exciting opportunities to study coaching, because that was one of the major components of this project we were going to run. And I knew I needed a lot of help with the research side and of all the opportunities to design a PD project from square one, and then be able to research coaching in the process. So I called Stephanie, and she was very gracious, and it started, I think, a really cool partnership for now the last 4 or 5 years. And yeah, so then we just started like thinking about all the different ways we could examine coaching. I think one of many of the projects that we landed on there was, how do coaches, we know coaching is relational, and it's supposed to be responsive, but like that very first touch point, when a coach and a teacher connect for the very first time, like what does that actually look like? How do we kind of figure out how those relationships start? Are there patterns? Are there trends? How do experienced coaches do this? And we think about like lesson launches. We all know that like a good lesson has a great launch, right? But what's the launch for coaching relationships? Where does that start? So anyway, what I missed, Stephanie?
No, that's great. And yeah, and I just say what further drew me to this work is like just like many of you, I'm a former instructional coach, and we know like how important it is to build relationships, but there's no manual that tells us exactly how to do that. And so what I loved about this work is that we took just a very up close discursive look at how coaches do this through their talk with teachers. And I think what emerged from this is really useful stuff for folks who are on the ground doing this in their day-to-day work. I think we forward a framework that coaches can pick up and say, like, these are some things for me to take into consideration when I first meet a teacher, and before even that coaching moment. How do I start building a relationship with them, building that foundation for coaching?
You've made me think about like when I was a coach. Like just some of the things that I heard, like one of the things that I had to tap into was because I had the content. And it wasn't until after this that I coached cricket, but but just tapping into like what are those aspects that make a coach, because you do bring some of those things into the role, but then the other part of it in terms of the relational piece, like building the relationship, but then also ensuring that there's community within coaches because it can become pretty lonely when you're in a school, you're the only one or you're the new one, it's a new position and they're like, what are you doing here? So just made me think about all of those things. So I'm more than anxious to hear all the rest of the things that you have to share based on your work.
Yeah, and when I think about how you mentioned, Karen, the loneliness that it could be, we have this series. So this series that we've had for a while is titled "Everyone Belongs in Mathematics," and I think this goes with our series. So thinking about your work, how does your work connect to belonging? But really, I mean, we've asked this question from all our guests, so we're going to go and ask you guys too. What does it mean to belong in mathematics? And you can think about it in terms of your work in the idea of coaching, because I love this connection between loneliness and belonging, and how we get that relationship to bring that in. So we'll go ahead and have that question for all of you. What does it mean to belong in mathematics? And we will start with so many people, I can't make up my mind. We'll start with Corey.
I think I thought a long time on this question. I think it's a hard question to consider in a lot of ways. But as I started to think about Kenny and I and our relationship for, over the past decade plus, especially as I got grounded in his work and that stepped into this new coaching position, I kept coming back to, like, in order to belong, you have to be accepted. And this idea of acceptance, it's not just based off of a single interaction. It's not even just based off of multiple interactions, but it's how others perceive you and what you do. And then one of the things I keep thinking about is how Kenny had been a teacher at this school. Like, people knew him. They already accepted him as in the role he was in. But when the title changed, the acceptance wasn't there at first. And so you already have relationships. And so it's easy to say, oh, we have to have relationships. Like, he had relationships, strong relationships with people. But because the title of this position changed, the acceptance changed with that too. And so it's like belonging isn't rigid. And belonging is really complex and dependent upon the context and the people and new school years and new leadership, belonging can change. And so it's an ongoing process and it's ongoing work. And it may not always be easy for individuals.
Ooh, man, I feel you on that one. Totally. Working with your same site. Like I think I was in the same position as Kenny was. You were a teacher there, and then your title changes and you become a coach, and everything. It's like the relationship changes. You have to build a new relationship on that. Man, it struck me on that. That's pretty powerful. Somebody else want to jump in here? How about Courtney?
Yeah, I agree. Like this, Corey was speaking to, and the complexity of it, right? And Karen, the thing I was going to start with was this idea of being isolated, right? Is not having that community. So kind of like the opposite of that. And it made me, one of the things I think about as I think about belonging in the mathematics community is having that agency to see yourself as a change maker, right? Whether you're a teacher, a classroom teacher, thinking about integrating rich math tasks or ambitious instruction, whether you're an interventionist working with fact fluency, whether you're a school-based or district leader and you're working on building capacity of other educators or parents or community, right? There's a lot of ways, and it shifts and it's dynamic, right? But I think about this moment that I had with one of my students. And, I was teaching online way before the pandemic. So it's like, I don't know, 2014 or 15, somewhere there. And we're in week 8 or 9. And this is the, I don't know, the 5th or 6th class in a series of 10 on, that works with the coaching competencies to become a math specialist, right? To engage. These are practicing teachers. They've been designing professional learning. And we were talking about, making a difference and talking to your administrators and designing professional learning. And what's the change you're going to enact? And I still remember one of my students just kind of turned her mic on and goes, yeah, but what can I do? I'm just a teacher. And that, right? Like breaks, right? And that moment for me as a teacher educator shifted how I think about belonging, because you assume that you're in these communities and, but you can still be isolated in those communities if your community isn't jiving with where you are, or, the roles shift, right? All those dynamics. So I think this space where you feel you have the agency to enact the ambitious math instruction that you aspire to, that you are empowered to engage in those spaces, that you have that, bringing out, Karen, what you talked about, that community and network, that you're not alone, you're not isolated, and that you have that professional learning and those supports to guide you, and that you can draw on, right? These great organizations like NCSM, and pulling in those resources to help continually advance and empower you as an individual.
Yeah, let me extend to what Courtney said, because as you know, we've been looking hard at the district math leader and what's this like for them, and the loneliness factor, if you will, exists for them as well. I'm just going to read you what I had written relative to this, and it said, it's critical for the district math supervisor to identify the support they need and know how to receive it, whether that's within a school or the school district, or by engaging in professional learning opportunities dedicated to their needs, for example, NCSM. So it's a critical role for organizations like NCSM, NCTM, and affiliates to frankly be that place. Because as one DMS colleague recently noted, quoting now, I know where I can find my lifeline and my peeps. And so I think to some extent we all need that. We all need, I've got this teacher who won't listen to me. Oh, guess what? They're in my school too. So it's just sort of relieving them about how to deal with difference in personalities. And frankly, we haven't said it directly, but I'll say it right now. The major change from dealing with, if you will, children to adult learners, and the differences and frankly the similarities between children and adult learners relative to need, and that connects with all of us.
Yeah, thank you for that. Ryan.
Well, yeah, I'll build on. It's funny, I made a few notes too, and I had the word agency. I thought it was kind of like a very narrow take on this very big idea. But I'm going to build right on what Courtney and Skip had to share. I think I had a slightly different perspective. I thought about it I think about how, as a teacher, the presence of a coach, I think, could be a very vulnerable space, because the spotlight's on your practice, right? And the coach is there to help you with your practice, not the other way around. And so I think about how coaching can have this big impact on a teacher's sense of belonging in mathematics education. And so to help make sense of that, I went down to the student level, and I think about student agency. Is math being done to me, or do I have an active role in this process where my ideas matter? I'm able to construct and explore. So then you go up to the teacher level. So is this coach here, and is this PD sort of being done to me because something is inherently wrong with the way I'm doing things previously, or is this person truly here to support me in my journey and where I'm looking to go next? And that's I think that can go either way very quickly based on sort of how the coach approaches that interaction. So anyway, and that kind of leads back to the study we did, is how do people start that coaching relationship in a really healthy way, so that from the very beginning, a teacher is feeling a sense of belonging, that they're not trying to be fixed, that they're trying to be supported in the process, because it's a precarious moment when that coaching starts.
Thank you. Stephanie.
So for this, I actually thought a lot about identity. And I started by thinking a lot about my kids and my family and just our like the different identities that we have in our family. So I'll be a little vulnerable. I'll share a little bit about my families. My kids are biracial, they're bilingual, multi-ethnic. My husband's an immigrant to this country. He was undocumented until he was in high school. English is not his first language. My youngest son, he thinks he is a princess. Um, uh, and so I think about all these identities and how I want my kids to feel in the math classroom. And what I want more than anything is for all of these different identities to be viewed as assets. So thinking about diversity of race, language, gender, immigration status, gender expression, that these are all viewed as assets, not deficits, and leveraged as such. So then skipping over to the layer of thinking not about just, between students and teachers, but then between teachers and coaches, what I would similarly want to see is the coach leveraging those different identities from teachers, again, as assets. So that's where my mind went, was thinking about just different identities, starting with my family and my kids. And to me, that is belonging. It's where we celebrate our identities and we leverage them as assets.
Thank you. Kenny.
Wow. I think one of the things that I've noticed is that when I try to put myself in the shoe or put myself in that shoe, is when Corey and I was working on this project, one of the things I recognized was belonging wasn't just me being invited into that space to work. It wasn't just me being present there physically. I think him valuing my thought process and my learning helped me to feel more belonging. It wasn't just that I was invited to do this. It's like, hey, you belong here. Your opinion matters. As a matter of fact, it not only matters, it's necessary to drive the success of what we're trying to do. And I think once we get students to feel that way, that, hey, it's not the first person that gets the answer or someone that knows all the procedure steps. You understand that I don't have to be respected if I cannot get to the final answer in this math problem. I understand that getting to the answer is not my end game. I feel belonging when I'm a intricate part of this mathematical community and my thinking is valued.
Nice.
You all left me with a lot to think about. The thing that's still swirling in my head that ties together what everyone said starts with Corey, when you said in order to belong, you have to be accepted. And when we go into these spaces as coaches, like, how do you begin to, like, you can't make yourself be accepted, you know what I mean? But I guess there are things that make it easier for people to accept you based on your purpose, based on the culture of what you're walking into, based on maybe even how you relate to them. And so, I don't know, I'm still processing around that, because when I started as a numeracy coach, it was a new position. And that was something that was felt regularly, like just not being accepted, not being wanted, not being desired, because going back to feeling like this is something that was being done to them. And so I'm going to go off script a little bit, but just wondering, like, tapping into the work and the research that you've done, like, what are those aspects that help coaches to begin to navigate those barriers when they walk into these spaces and they have to gain acceptance from the people that they're working with and gain their trust to help build a relationship so that they can truly partner together for the ultimate goal of the work? And anyone can jump in and start.
I'll share.
Well, let me just say that first of all, Karen, what you express is sadly pretty common. All of a sudden, you're the coach and you appear, if you will, and people don't know you and have questions about, well, why is she here? And so wrote a quick note. Who is supporting the coach? That is key. who sets that program up? Who is there to frankly listen to you, to be on call for you, to say, you know, I have this teacher who, for whatever reason, won't let me in the classroom, and so how do I work with that? And where are networks of other people in the district for people to come together and have discussions about, you know, how do we work together? Support is critical.
I think that acceptance, though, is also like, it goes back to yourself. Like, you have to accept yourself in this position and in this work. And a lot of times people who are new to this role, there's a lot of self-doubt. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of insecurity sometimes because the system isn't there. But this acceptance of yourself and who you are and where you are, it helps. But that also comes back to a level of honesty. So when you get to this place where, okay, I'm here, I can do this work, you know, and those doubts always are in the back of our mind, but like accepting that you can contribute to this also means advocating for yourself as well too. And so being really clear about those systems that need to be in place, so everyone can have honest conversations about what we're doing, why we're doing it, what are our roles and our responsibilities, and what are we going to need as individuals to be successful as we support the whole team and support other people. So it's quite complex, but I would encourage others who are stepping into this place to like know you can do this, and then advocate for yourself. And what are some of those first steps that you can take? What is something that you think you need? I mean, sometimes it's, you know, I don't know that right off the bat, Kenny, if anyone ever asked you, like, so what do you need in order to do this work? It was just kind of like, you're the coach.
Yeah. And it kind of goes back to what Skip was saying. I think having those roles identified from leadership helps, because with an instructional coach, it's kind of funny, but it's not. We're not administrators. So I don't go to any of the alt meetings. But I'm not a teacher, so I don't get invited to any of the teacher lounges, meetings, so we're right there in the middle. So you're walking that fine line every day. So establishing that relationship is important. But again, especially in the international context, there wasn't much around what a coach should do. I mean, you have a coaching model, but people are not models. So building that relationship was vital.
I'm going to build. I think there's so many connections, right? And I think this idea of accept as well. There's a level when you think about yourself, accepting that it's okay not to have all the answers, right? And accepting that the individuals, whatever informal or formal leadership work that you're doing, but the individuals you're working with are valuable partners, right? And that and accepting that they have knowledge. Right. Like nobody comes to, like, if you're in education, right. I always, but like, I think about now and all the political strife and the tensions that were, you know, the historical, the conceptual versus procedural, we've lots of our states are doing like extreme hyper acceleration. Right. And so how are we navigating those? You know, every educator is showing up. Right. And helping here, and we're helping students. So we really have to all believe that we're all in it together. So we also have to recognize or accept, right, this idea that it's one of the most coaching is and being coached are the two of the most vulnerable acts that we have for as I think about leadership, right? Because you have to put yourself in that vulnerable place, but ultimately the goal of coaching is to improve practice or shift practice or change practice or expand, right? But we're changing ultimately our practice, which is highly connected to our core beliefs, values, our identity, our culture, right? So as we think about doing this work and approaching it with care and really putting yourself as a leader, right, formal or informal, in these spaces of being vulnerable, right, and working with your partners, the teachers, the educators, the other school-based coaches, or whoever you're working with, in this act of coaching. And so I think that modeling that vulnerability is for me, as I think about what's the entryway, and it takes time, Yes. But the danger of us saying it takes time is that sometimes positions are only funded for a short amount of time. And so how do we, right? And so how do we navigate spaces where um, you might get a chance to get hired if you can show that you're making changes or shifts. But if we wait for something to happen, like, so how can you do both of those? How can you, and I think being vulnerable is one way where, all right, let's be vulnerable. I've never tried this thing. You've never tried that part of it, but you have this expertise and I've got this. So together we can explore and see what happens.
Just wanted to add one small thing, and I hope I'm not I'm not taking this in the wrong direction, but Karen, I think you said, how do you gain entry? Is that how you, like, you're a coach, how do you get initiated? Was that your launch question? Yeah, so like this is something I've always been so curious about, and so I sat down and asked 30 coaches in a previous study, like, how do you do this? How do you gain entry and access to a classroom? And it is wild, all of the things that they talked about. And I will just say it's far beyond just relational strategies, which are so important. But there is so much more than that. It's leveraging structures. Thinking about what structures do I have at my fingertips, and how do I embed myself into those structures? Sometimes it's pitching in. It's pitching in to build goodwill and doing things that don't necessarily, move teaching and learning immediately, but you're trying to build goodwill so that those opportunities can eventually happen. So anyway, I got real excited when I heard your question, because I've thought a lot about that for a while.
Well, I'll chime in with, I think one of the findings that we had from our JMEL study, which I think is relevant. I'm going to go into the weeds for a second, but I promise I hope it'll connect back. So I think when Stephanie and I started the study, like, how do coaches have these opening conversations with teachers? Like, and I think, Stephanie, you said it, like, we were hoping there'd be like a little protocol or a manual that we could provide of like, how do you do this? And I'm going to emphasize the word doing here. But so we lifted this little framework about data gathering behaviors, what kind of questions should you ask, and sharing behaviors, like how do you use these opportunities to share. And then we had this bucket of codes that were called emotional rapport building, and there was no consistency across any of the behaviors in any of these. They were drastically different. Like, some people were talking about their dogs for 20 minutes, and it was all. And some people were very serious, and they were all different. At the end, everybody loved their coach. Everybody had these great. So these conversations started in very, very, very different places. The only unifying theme we could find was the presence of these emotional rapport codes, which were things like showing empathy, showing concern. And these were, in our coaches in our study, these were very, very, they were selected because they were seasoned, they were experienced, they had a track record of being successful. So across these 10 coaches, the way that they showed and communicated emotional rapport was the only consistency. So I think one of the big takeaways is, as coaching, now this is the interpretation of it, it's less about the doing of it. And I heard Kenny say it a second ago about when he first met Corey. It's less about what Corey did and about who Corey showed up as. So I think it's one of the big things is coaching is just so dispositional, as opposed to, everybody wants questioning techniques and how do I do, but it's really, I think, who are you showing up as? I think that's what we have really learned, despite the fact that we really wanted this cool manual we can hand people, how you do coaching, opening conversations. So
that's wonderful information and discussion. Great question, Karen. You just you hit it out of the ballpark with that question. It is clear that NCSM and this podcast, we can talk for hours on coaching. There's just so much. And I know that many of us experience coaching, and we've experienced all these things. And I know that many of our listeners are coaches. And I think that the conversation that we had today, they're going to get so much out of, and they can get so much more if they just go to JMEL and read the research and the things that you did over the course of your research in these last several months, and that just got published. So I recommend that people go out there and they read that. I was fascinated when I was doing my little bit of research here before the podcast to ask some questions, and I would love to hear so much more. But of course, we only have so much time in a podcast. So we are going to fast forward to our end, which is just giving one tip that leaders can do to support a sense of belonging in mathematics that's connected to your work. So we'll go around really quickly with your quick tip. And then as you give your quick tip, just a quick mention of where that people can get more information aside from JMEL. And we will start with Stephanie.
Okay. My quick tip is download our article, go to page, I'm on too many screens here, go to page 41, look at that table 7. That gives our framework for the different categories: data gathering, sharing and educating, and rapport building. And I think this provides just a roadmap, not a how-to, but it's more of, here are the different ways that you can, through your talk, build rapport with a teacher as you're trying to embark on this coaching relationship with them. So that's my bit of advice, or my tip.
All right. Great. Ryan, do you want to add anything to that? I know that you guys were together on that.
Yeah, I would just say be sure to balance, whether you're a coach working with teachers or you're supporting coaches, is just to really attend. It sounds deep and kind of, I don't know, fluffy maybe is the right word, but just that disposition, like, who are you and why do you do what you do, and stay grounded with that. Because if you're authentic in how you show up with teachers, that's seems to be this sort of linchpin for all of these successful opening conversations. It wasn't about the questions that got asked, or what was shared. It was about sort of this rapport building, these techniques. And I think that comes from an authenticity, and that's kind of deeper work than just technique.
Oh, great. Thanks. Skip?
Sure. Let me just start that with the following. That is, NCSM is the leadership organization. So to some sense, you have this wonderful opportunity to truly assist coaches, math leaders, however defined. So my comment is, mathematics leaders, from elementary math specialists to district math specialists, need opportunities to engage with each other, to have the time to discuss related responsibilities and challenges, and develop the collegial support system so necessary for their short and long-term planning, access to resources, and their ongoing knowledge of research and best practice. You can do this. We can do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Courtney,
I'm ready
to add there?
Yeah, I'm going to say, circling back for a different tip. If you're in that space where you're feeling isolated or you're searching for that belonging, right? Reach out to your national and state organizations, find another person locally who you can connect with, really find that professional learning space for you where you can learn from and with another. So again, then you can think about that work and not being in isolation.
Great. All right, Corey.
What first comes to mind is be really clear about the system you're trying to create, and not just the individual work with an individual person or a small group of people. Know the system that you want to build and that you want to create. And when you know that, then the plan starts to help. You can start to see the map a little bit clearer about what you want to do and where you're going with things. And where to learn more about that? As Skip said, NCSM. So if you're not able to get to one of the annual meetings, which I would say do whatever you can to try to get there to help build that network. You're going to meet so many people to connect with, start swapping emails, numbers. If you can't do that, because it can be hard sometimes, reach out to the regional directors and start building your network locally, and see how they can connect you or support you or get you involved in different ways with NCSM, because it's a big world. There's a lot of people who are there who can help us be more, do more, and think better about what we're doing. So let's reach out to the ones who can help guide that.
All right, thank you. Kenny, take us home.
I think what Corey and Ryan said wraps it up. I think recognizing that it's not the people, it's the process. If we listen to understand before attempting to influence, I've seen that people are more willing to grow when they know you have their best interests at hand. So making sure we understand that.
One thing that you all make me think about in terms of like finding your people, when we had to go into shutdown and we were all by ourselves, like as a coach, that was probably one of the loneliest moments because, you don't have to open up your screen to me. But it took like people who were in the building who had those connections with the teachers to build a bridge to those who were supporting the coaching like on the outside. But that was also a time period for me when the X, formerly Twitter, was really bumping and was on fire with like all the mathematical things. And then because we were moving from this physical space to a virtual space, like I began connecting with all kinds of strangers. And then when we came out of that, or as we were on our way out of that, I mentioned this in the last podcast, which was focused on the conference, going to California by myself. It was the first time going without the team, without my work buddies, and so forth. And that was when I began to establish my own network and began finding my people and ended up with more of my people with all of you on the screen, which has been amazing just for me professionally, for my growth, and just, it just took me on a journey that I had no idea that I would be a part of. So I appreciate you all like saying that and reminding us to find our people and discover those ways of breaking down those barriers so that we can not feel accepted, but be accepted by others, because we're tapping into their needs, like seeing them for who they are, like recognizing their assets and building those relationships so that it can become a true partnership. So I really appreciated this conversation and love that work is out there. As you can tell, coaching is still pretty passionate to me, even though that's not my current role. But I did enjoy being a coach when I was one.
Yeah, absolutely. Community, relationships, that's our humanity, right? And so thank you so much. I know NCSM is grateful for this I'm grateful for this conversation. And I think everyone out there, like I said before, is going to get so much out of today. So if you want to know more information and you want to read more, again, go look at the latest publication of JMEL. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, our guests. Thank you for listening. And all of our listeners, we hope that you'll join us next month. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
We hope that you have been inspired by this bold mathematics leadership conversation and will tune in to our podcast series each month. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. You can learn more about NCSM leadership and mathematics education and our upcoming professional learning events on the NCSM website, mathedleadership.com. You can also follow NCSM on the X at mathedleaders and using the hashtag NCSMBold. Until next time.